What's up, everybody? We're back. Corey Hughes Bloody History. So, happy April Fool's Day. Today, my April Fool's joke was that I didn't do a show, but of course, here I am. I've been moving for 2 days. I got stuck out in the rain with my motorcycle with a dead battery. It has been a hell of an adventure. But here I am. I'm tired, but I'm here nonetheless. And we are continuing on with this Sergio Arcacha file in the Jim Garrison papers. I'd like to reiterate what I've said before, and that is that it is my belief that the absolute vast majority of Garrison's papers are destroyed, are gone. John Barber had told me that he had known the person who went and got Garrison's files and scanned them, and he showed me his collection of, his personal collection of Jim Garrison's papers, and it didn't appear to be any different from the standard papers that are currently out there. I don't know if John Barber was the source for these papers or not, but I know that the vast majority of the papers were destroyed by Harry Connick Sr. So, fuck him and his piano-playing son, or whatever the fuck he does. Lately, I've found that Weisberg's files have been much better for me, at least, in this phase of my research. I found 2-3 interviews that Jim Garrison had done that should be in the Jim Garrison papers that you'll never find in the Jim Garrison papers, right? So that's a good thing. I'm hoping to stumble across more of these interviews. Like, I'll fucking kill for a goddamn interview of William Seymour. The idea that Garrison tracked down Hall and Howard but couldn't track down Seymour, to me, is a joke. So, I don't know that I've seen any references to an interview with Seymour in the Garrison papers. If any of you know if there is or not, shoot me an email and let me know. William Seymour. So Tony, a good friend of mine and a researcher, did some work for me, and he pulled some information on William Seymour. And what he found was that there's a William W. Seymour who was associated with the alias of William Houston Seymour. What does that mean? What does that mean? How do I interpret that? I don't know. I don't know. If William W. Seymour is his real name, and Houston was just an alias, then that might open a lot of doors in regards to genealogy. Tony also found this this William W. Seymour, who was associated with the name William Houston Seymour, to have started a company, a surveying company, in Connecticut, of all places. So that is where I'm at, roughly, with the identification of William Seymour in the modern era. If any of you want to take that information and run with it and get back to me, that would be greatly appreciated. Determining whether or not William Houston Seymour's real name is William W. Seymour. What else could the W be for? William Seymour. Who knows? Who knows if it's even the same person or just an administrative error along the way? I'm very interested to find out. So continuing on in this file on Sergio Arcacha. We have some more stuff that seems to be unrelated, but sort of, but not really. So here we're going to have a memorandum to James L. Alcock, Executive Assistant District Attorney, from Captain Frederick A. Sewell, Sr., Investigator. Reference an interview with Clara Flournoy Bootsy Gay under item number 2, Al Clark interview. So this is going to relate to G. Ray Gill, and Sergio Arcacha did some work for G. Ray Gill or was associated with Gill in one way, shape, or form. So this might not be too far off base, but I understand the context of this, the content and context of this memo already. And I don't think that it seems to have much connection, but I'll read it and we'll take it from here. In answer to a subpoena, Bootsy Gay came into the office on this date at about 2:45 p.m. She stated to Sewell and Mr. James Alcock that she resides at 528 Dumaine Street and is employed at Max Hill's Painting Suppliers, located at 629 St. Peter Street. She stated that just prior to the assassination, she was having G. Ray Gill do some legal work of a civil nature for her. She made several trips to Gill's office and observed David Ferry, who had an office at Gill's office, and she understood that Ferry was an investigator for Gill. The day following the John Kennedy assassination, a Saturday, she, Mrs. Gay, went to Gill's office and observed that 2 female employees were cleaning out Ferry's desk. She saw a chart or a sketch, and what caught her eye was the fact that this chart had Elm written on what appeared to be a street. There was also a building, and on that street was a square with letters VIP written in the square. Mrs. Gay stated that she remarked to the receptionist that this should be turned over to the FBI. The receptionist then picked it off the desk and threw it in the trash, stating it was nothing. Mrs. Gay stated that she then took the document from the trash can, stating she would give it to the FBI. The receptionist then grabbed the document from Mrs. Gay's hand and threw it again in the trash. Mrs. Gay seems to have been about 60 years old, reasonably intelligent, slightly nervous, and very cooperative. She appears to be the type of individual that likes to see justice prevail. So, this is pretty interesting. I think it's pretty damning, and I believe it is an accurate representation of something that went on at Gill's office in regards to Ferry and Dealey Plaza. I apologize for the constant clicking in the background. That's my little one. And we have seemingly tile or laminate or something, and it's clicking all over the place. So, So yeah, I believe this is something was going on to where Ferry would have had a map of Dealey Plaza. It seems pretty plausible. If something was left behind, they were cleaning it out, and her timing was that perfect. The only thing I find a little questionable is, like, why is she going to G. Ray Gill? He's a mob lawyer. How is she connected in some other ways? You know, is there an alternative reason for giving this statement? Who knows? Memorandum, April 4th, 67. To Jim Garrison from William Gervich, Special Aid. Subject, Sergio Arcacha Smith, February 25th, 1967, Dallas, Texas. On 25 February 1967, James Alcock and I flew to Dallas, Texas to interview Sergio Arcacha Smith and conduct other business relating to the current special investigation. After our arrival in Dallas, Alcock telephoned the residence of Arcacha Smith. He was told by Mrs. Arcacha Smith, just a minute. And when she returned to the phone, she asked Alcock to call back in 1 hour. At 5 p.m., Alcock called again, and Mrs. Arcacha said her husband was not there and was with the district attorney of Dallas and had expressed his desire to meet in a group with this district attorney. On both calls, Alcock identified himself. He had previously spoken with Arcacha, who expected to hear from us on this date. At 9:30 p.m. this same date, a third call was made, and a man answered the phone and identified himself to Alcock as Detective Rogers of the Dallas Police Department. He said Arcacha was present but preferred to be interviewed in police headquarters, and we were asked to meet him there at room 316. At 10 p.m., we arrived in room 316. Arcacha arrived at 10:20, accompanied by Detectives Rogers and Burnley. We were then taken to a conference room on the same floor and exchanged identification. Alcock explained our presence was to have Arcacha identify certain persons and to give us background information. Arcacha said, "Okay, shoot." Alcock said we could not talk in the presence of others except an attorney if Arcacha wanted one present. Arcacha said this was the only way he would talk to us in front of these detectives. I then said we might as well go, as we could not conduct an interview under these conditions, and again reminded Arcacha his attorney could be present. Arcacha then addressed me and said someone had been looking for him, displaying identification similar to that which I had displayed. Arcacha shook his finger at me and was visibly nervous and excited. So, this is pretty interesting. Arcacha is going to be interviewed by Alcock. It appears as though he gives them somewhat of a runaround, then agrees to speak with them at the Dallas police. Interesting, huh? Why would he want to be questioned with Dallas police officers there? Anything that he could say could be used against him by those police officers, right? It doesn't make any sense. Why would he feel protected having cops there? Continuing on, I asked Arcacha why he needed police protection, which was the reason the detectives gave for being with him. I asked if he thought he needed police protection from the district attorney of New Orleans, and he made no comment. I then asked the detectives if Arcacha needed protection from anyone and if he had been threatened or feared he would be harmed. I then said the district attorney of New Orleans would assist in furnishing such protection if it were needed. There was no comment from anyone. Detective Burnley then stated they had told Arcacha he would be arrested if we had a warrant. For this, we expressed our gratitude. We explained we had no warrant and did not come to Dallas to arrest Arcacha, but were simply here to interview him, adding that should it be necessary, we would get a warrant. At this point, Detective Rogers sarcastically asked, "And who do you think would serve that warrant?" I then asked Rogers, "Are you saying you wouldn't?" Rogers then repeated his question, and I repeated mine. Detective Burnley then interrupted as if recognizing Rogers' mistake. Okay, so what you have here is the Dallas police overtly protecting Arcacha, right? Overtly protecting Arcacha. Arcacha was again informed no one but his attorney could be present. He said he could arrange for this on Monday, 3 days hence, but could not remember his own attorney's name. Detective Rogers then said the attorney's name was Alexander. Alcock asked Arcacha if this was his attorney, and Burnley and Rogers both spoke up and admitted Alexander was the first assistant district attorney of Dallas County. Alcock then said we could not consent to this. Alcock and I explained this was a confidential matter, and it should be understood we had no intention of revealing any part of this to anyone, and trusted they, as police officers, should understand this better than anyone. Alcock and I then walked out of the conference room, and Arcacha, Burnley, and Rogers followed us into the hallway. The detectives then said the press room was close by and asked that we return to the conference room. We returned there only to ask that our feelings not be construed as rudeness, and then Alcock and I departed. So they're getting a lot of pushback from Dallas, right? Dallas doesn't want them poking their nose around where it doesn't belong. That memo was from William Gervich. All right. Memorandum, April 17th, 1969. Reference Shaw and Jules Rico Kimball to Sergeant Louis Ivan, Chief Investigator, from Sergeant Fred Williams, Investigator. Reference the Golden Lantern Bar, 1239 Royal Street, New Orleans, Louisiana. The following information was obtained by the undersigned from the Alcoholic Beverages Unit, Sergeant Lloyd Erdman. In March of 1964, a Wesley Bowman was permittee of the above. In 1965, Vincent Anthony Casey was the permittee. In 1966, the Golden Lantern was closed, and it was opened again in 1967 by Casey and has continued since under his operation. Prior to this permittee of 1239 Royal, Chico's Patio Bar was Jose A. Colon, C-O-L-O-N. He was permittee from 1948 through 1964. It is also believed that one Chris Blake, a personal friend of Clay Shaw, has a silent interest in the Golden Lantern. The Golden Lantern is a stag bar catering to the upper-class homosexual element in the city. And that is from Sergeant Fred Williams. Memo 2, LJ Delsa. Reference possible questions for T.E. Beckham. So see, this is another thing to notice. Garrison has lumped this file, this individual file, with Chrisman along with the others in the Sergio Arcacha file. So oftentimes he did this on purpose, like with the Kerry Thornley stuff, putting the Tippett memo first, then putting the Douglas Jones printing memo second. That was pretty obvious. He knew what time it was there. But when you have larger sections like the Clara Flournoy Gay memo, or this here having to do with Chrisman and Beckham, you have to wonder if he did that on purpose or if it's a misfile, right? Let's read through it and see if there's any reference to Arcacha here. Now remember, what these are possible questions that they've written up to ask Thomas Beckham, all right? Where and when, and obviously Beckham was running in the same circles as Arcacha. The commonalities being Guy Bannister and Jack Martin and those guys, Bill Dalzell. So first question is, where and when did he meet Chrisman? Who introduced them? Give the names of all persons in whose company he has ever seen Chrisman. After meeting Chrisman, in what places, when, and under what circumstances did he subsequently encounter Chrisman? Itemize and give full details. If travel was involved, what were the arrangements and who made them? Did Chrisman ever use a credit card in his presence? What kind? For example, did Chrisman possess an air travel card? Other credit cards? Does he recall the user's name in the left-hand corner? Has he ever been to hotels, restaurants, or stores with Chrisman? Where and when? Did Chrisman seem to know any of these places? Did Chrisman, to his knowledge, ever use any other names? So this is interesting because you can tell that obviously Chrisman's an OG spook, right? Everybody's calling him after they get in trouble. Clay Shaw, Thomas Beckham, obviously. Beckham ends up in Washington and Tacoma area and also in Omaha. Chrisman being the common thread there as well. So Garrison knows that Chrisman is an OG spook, and so he's looking for any other connections he can dig into to kind of uncover more about him. How did Chrisman usually dress when he saw him? What was his customary mode of travel between cities? How did he customarily move about within a city? Taxicabs, car? If car, who was the owner or alleged owner? What was Chrisman's evident economic level of living? Food, lodging, kind of wristwatch, etc. What did Chrisman give as his source of income? Beckham, as a minister for a non-existent church, would have to have known this parallel role of Chrisman's would produce no income. Did Beckham ever see Chrisman in the presence of Guy Bannister or Clay Shaw? Much less likely, but possible David Ferry. Why does he say much less likely, I wonder? Kerry Thornley, Leighton Martins, Laverne Larry Crawford, Lee Oswald, Cubans, Reverend Raymond Broshears, Bob Lavender, William Dalzell, Bruce Ray Carlin, George de Mornshield. Where and when, under what circumstances? Who introduced you to whom? Who appeared to be the dominant in the sense of inference of command, personality? Did Beckham ever meet or see any of these persons separately? Was anyone else present on any such occasion? Repeat same questions with regard to unknown personalities encountered with Chrisman, their detailed descriptions. In any and all such instances, what were the subjects of conversation? What were Chrisman's stated or demonstrated sexual preferences? Any indications of homosexuality, as in the case of Ferry or Shaw? Any indications of sadism, as in the case of Shaw? Did Beckham ever have any sexual relations with Chrisman, with Shaw, or with Ferry? With any others whose names have been mentioned above? With anyone apparently connected with Chrisman? What contacts did you have with Chrisman in New Orleans in 62 or 63? Under what circumstances? Were you given any assignments or duties as a result? Did you receive any payments as a result? From whom? Did you have the occasion to use Chrisman outside of New Orleans at any time in 63? And where? Under what circumstances? Did you receive any assignments or duties to perform? And follow up with relevant questions depending on his answers. Did you ever leave New Orleans in 63? Example, Mandeville in January of 63. Describe the places and the dates. For what purpose did you leave on each occasion? How did you travel? Where did you stay? What did you do? who made the arrangements for you? In connection with any of the other names previously mentioned, did you ever receive any assignments or things to do from them? Any subsequent remunerations from whom? What were your sources of income in 1963? For doing what? How often in 62 and 63? Did you have occasion to visit the Newman Building, Bannister's place, at 531 Lafayette or 544 Camp Street? Did you receive job assignments in that connection? Any payments to you? By whom and why? What other persons did you see at that location? How often? What activity were they engaged in? Who appeared to be in charge? If Bannister, who appeared to be in charge of Bannister? Have you ever had occasion to see any of these individuals outside of that building, and under what circumstances? Did you have a mailbox key to the post office building across from Bannister's office? Why? Did any other persons who hung around his office have such keys, and why? Have you ever had occasion to go to the Mancuso restaurant in that building, and how frequently? With whom have you gone there? Who else did you ever have occasion to see there, and how frequently? What seemed to be Bannister's main activity? What appeared to you to be the source of or sources of his income? What appeared to be the sources of income of other persons frequenting his office? Did they ever indicate the sources to you? Did any of them indicate to who other than Bannister they were working for? Did you ever have occasion to see any of these individuals receive money or envelopes apparently containing money? Did you ever have occasion to see men in green army-type fatigues in that area, Americans or Cubans? Why did they seem to be coming there? Did anyone seem to be in charge of them? Do you know where their training camps were? Had you ever had occasion to visit them? If so, with whom and under what circumstances? Did anyone ever tell you what they were training for? Did anyone ever tell you who they were training for? Have you ever been to Clay Shaw's apartment on Dauphine Street, David Ferry's on Louisiana Avenue Parkway, or the International Trade Mart, any of the residences of persons previously mentioned, and for what purpose? Prior to November 22nd, 63, did you hear the assassination discussed in any way, and by whom and where? Did you have occasion to see Fred Chrisman in November of 1963? Where and under what circumstances? Do you know what cities Chrisman was in November of 63? Do you know whether Chrisman was ever in Dallas, Texas, and when and for what? Were you ever in Dallas, Texas, and when and for what? Do you know any persons whom were in Dallas in November of 1963? And did you ever hear the names of any persons who were in Dallas in November of 1963? And I think we all should know at this point that Beckham was in Dallas in November 22nd, 1963, where he's photographed at the airport. Clear as day, best photograph of anyone ever taken is Thomas Beckham at the airport on November 22nd, 63, with in the background of Kennedy driving in the limo. On November 22nd, 63, do you know where Guy Bannister was? Note, apparently in New Orleans, but not at his office all day. Do you know whom he was with? Do you know why he didn't come to the office that day? Or did you later have occasion to hear where he was? What he did and with whom, with regard to the individuals who hung around Bannister's office, or anyone whose name I have mentioned to you? Do you know of any unusual activity on their part that day? Did you hear of any unusual activity on their part? Describe where you spent November 22nd, 1963, and describe in detail what you did all day. Did you have any occasion to go to a hotel or motel? If so, for what purpose? Who else did you see there? And what were they doing? After November 22nd, 63, when did you next see Chrisman? And where and for what purpose? Same question re Bannister, Shaw, and Ferry, or any other persons with whom he acknowledged a relationship. Was the assassination discussed in any way? If so, what was said and by whom? Describe in full detail subsequent occasions in which you saw Chrisman in 1963, in 64, and then from 64 to 68. So one thing I want to comment on real quick. When he's laying out these questions for Thomas Beckham, and he's digging into Chrisman, Bannister, Shaw, Ferry, Garrison knows this is the epicenter of the planning of the assassination. Minus Bannister a little bit, because you can't put him at any of those meetings at Ferry's house or hanging out with the Cubans, other than activity at his place of business, right? So Bannister does not exist outside his place of business, And that one meeting with Kerry Thornley and Martin McAuliffe over the Idle Warriors. Right? Right? Everything else we know about Bannister happened while he was surrounding his work at the office and his private investigation business, if there ever really was such a thing. Jack Martin allegedly did the private investigation work, but if the Jack Martin in the story is the Edward Suggs that we know, nobody should have fucking trusted that guy to walk your goddamn dog. So I don't know what kind of investigation he was doing for Bannister. It doesn't make sense. The whole business reeks of affront. Or maybe Bannister really was just keeping tabs on everything that was going on like a good little spook. All right, let me keep going. Did you ever have occasion to visit Chrisman in the state of Washington? And when and for what purpose? How often? Who else was present? How long did you visit? Did you ever see him in Oregon, in Nebraska, in any other states? Have you been to Chrisman's home, his ranch? In either case, describe. Have you ever been to Tacoma or Olympia, Washington, and for what purpose, etc.? Have you ever been to Charleston or Turner, Oregon? Same follow-up. In connection with Chrisman, have you ever heard of a Colonel White? Wilbert. Wilbert White. Colonel Wilbert White. Interesting. And what do you know about him? Has Chrisman ever discussed the assassination in your presence? Has he ever mentioned the name Laverne Larry Crawford? See, that would be very interesting if Chrisman knew Larry Crawford. When did you decide to move to Nebraska? Whose idea was it? Did you meet with or talk to Chrisman before moving there? Who made the arrangements for you to go to Omaha? Who paid for your transportation there? When you went to Nebraska, what state had you been in before that? And what state before that? What was the purpose in your going to Omaha and settling there? Were you given instructions and an assignment? Through whom did you meet your officer contact at the Offutt Air Force Base there? What other contacts did you have at Offutt Air Force Base? How frequently did you meet your officer contact? What was the usual purpose of your meeting? What did you usually talk about? What business were you supposedly engaged with? Whose idea was it and how long did it last? Where was it located? Who was the landlord? What was the rent? Who paid it? Did the business show a profit? Remember, Beckham had told Jim Garrison that he had hooked up with a colonel there. I don't think it was Colonel White, but he had hooked up with a colonel. Oh, God, what was his name? I think maybe it begins with an L. But he had hooked up with a guy there, and he was going to engage in something, but then Chrisman ends up opening up a bookstore with this colonel, and then they never sold any fucking books, right? So weird CIA spook shit going on. The real question is, what were they really doing while they were running these fronts, right? Is it not a fact that your church and business actually were mere covers? What was your real function in Omaha? For whom were you working? Or for whom did you think you were working? What was the real source of your income? How were you paid and how frequently? Describe in full detail the nature of your relationship with any and all persons at Offutt Air Force Base. Was it a SAC base? If affirmative, how did you know that? I don't know what an SAC base is. Maybe secret something or something Air Command. Going back to Fred Chrisman of Washington, you were aware, are you not, that he was not a real minister of a real church? What do you consider to have been the actual nature of his activity, his real job, his real function? What do you think was the real source of his income? By the time you had spent several years in Omaha, and certainly by 1968, you must have acquired your own ideas as to what Chrisman's real activity was. What did you conclude it was? Who did you believe him to be working for? Who did you consider to be his real boss? What did you think he was attempting to accomplish while using the cover of minister? In 1968, when you were subpoenaed by the district attorney, grand jury in New Orleans, did you call Chrisman? And if so, why? What did he tell you to do? Why did you then leave Nebraska and go over into Iowa in an effort to avoid extradition to New Orleans? When you arrived in New Orleans in 68 as a result of your extradition to testify, you were driving a 1968 car. What was your financial condition then? Where was the money coming from? What had you been doing to earn it? Who paid for the car? During that time while you were in New Orleans, you told a man by the name of David Lewis that you were working for the CIA. What did you mean by that? David Lewis, that's another name I need to pull the data for. After you testified before the New Orleans grand jury, did you contact anyone and discuss with them the questions asked and your answers? After the grand jury appearance, when did you next talk to Chrisman and why? About what? After that grand jury appearance, were you questioned about it by representatives of any federal agency, and what did they ask you? Prior to the assassination on November 22nd, 63. Were you questioned by any federal agency? If so, what was the subject of the questioning? And after the assassination, were you questioned by any federal agency? Same follow-up. What contacts have you had with Christmas in 68? By phone? Who phoned whom? By mail? By visit? Place, reason, subject of discussion? Have you received any assignments or things to do from him since, or anyone else? Any remuneration? How much? How frequently? And for what? What was the first church for which you became a minister, and whose idea? Who told you how to get your credentials, and what was the reason? What subsequent churches did you purport to become a minister or bishop for? Same follow-up questions. What church was Ferry a priest for? What church did Chrisman represent, and what church does he represent now? What was their apparent reason for these phony religious convictions? So if you'll recall, Beckham had incorporated like 2,000 freaking churches and businesses and all kinds of fake stuff. If you go back and listen to my episodes on Thomas Beckham, he tries to fill in all the gaps, right? He tries to give as much information as he seemingly can. But he definitely holds back. But yeah, his answers are all contained in in those episodes that I did on him. Why is this non-existent church business so recurrent with you and persons with whom you have associated? It is not a fact that the non-existent church in the title of minister or bishop serves as a cover for other activities. What activities were these with regard to you? With regard to others? Go into indicated follow-up questions. Have you ever heard of the Church of the Abundant Life located in Oak Park? Or that's Oak Cliff, actually. It's the Abundant Life Temple. Dallas in 1963, scene of Officer Tippett's murder. Have you ever heard of Reverend O.B. Graham of Dallas? O.B. Graham was one of the incorporators of the Abundant Life Church. Have you ever heard anyone discuss the use of an evangelical church building in Dallas in connection with the assassination? Are you aware of the use of any of these odd churches, existent or non-existent, used anywhere in connection with the assassination? Have you ever heard anyone discuss these odd churches with regard to the assassination? With regard to any clandestine or undercover activity? If the answer is affirmative, give names and details. All right, here we go. And who introduced you to Sergio Arcacha? When and where did you meet him? Did you ever perform any assignments or duties or jobs for him? When, where, and under what circumstances? Did you ever receive any pay for this? Have you ever seen or met Arcacha outside of New Orleans? Where and on what occasion? Did you know when Arcacha moved from New Orleans? Do you know what city he moved to? In parentheses says Houston. Do you know what city Arcacha was living in November 1963? The answer was Dallas. Do you know whether or not Chrisman knew Arcacha in 62, 63, or later? Did Arcacha know Chrisman? Have you ever heard one mention the other, and under what circumstances? Do you know whether Chrisman knew Jack Ruby or Officer Tippett? If so, follow up. Have you ever seen Chrisman supply money to anyone? Under what circumstances? For what purpose? Did Chrisman fly to New Orleans, to your knowledge, very often? If yes, how often? And approximate the number of times in 62 through 68. Have you ever had Chrisman's home phone number? What city was it in? Why were you given it? How often have you used it? Do you know his present number? When did you last know his home phone number? Do you know whether or not Arcacha knew Chrisman's home phone number? Clay Shaw or Bannister's? Have you ever heard any of these men called Chrisman long distance? Or under what circumstance? Have you ever heard of anyone else calling Chrisman long distance, and under what circumstance? Did you ever have an occasion to deliver money to or for Chrisman or for Arcacha? And under what circumstance? Did you ever have occasion to deliver money to or for anyone else? And how much was involved? Who assigned you to this task? Have you ever held such sums of money for anyone other than the individuals I have named? For Cuban organizations? For any organizations whatsoever? Remember, in his interview, Beckham admits that he was running money for like the RNC and stuff, right? Cash payoffs. So I think a lot of what Chrisman and these guys, some of these guys like Beckham, who seemed like a total dipshit, that's what they were doing. They were doing other stuff. They were doing running for significant operations, but they were a cog in a machine. They weren't super spooks. Well, Chrisman was, but he was more of a handler, a manager. Beckham, he's a dumb fuck, and they'd be like, hey, he's a courier. Go take this and deliver it over here. Take this and deliver it over here. Take this and deliver it over here. And they would have a fake job set up like a bookstore, but that they never sold any books. And that would be good enough of a cover while he was doing other things. And he could say, I was in Tacoma working at the bookstore. There you go. Since 62, how often would you estimate you have made commercial airlines flights? And then 62 through 68. And what cities? Who paid the airfare? What was the purpose of the flight? If he answered that there were too many flights to remember, shift to questions concerning amount and source of his income during those years. Develop any disproportionate ratio of air travel to yearly income. Do you know whether or not Chrisman is or was a pilot? Did he ever describe his military service to you? Has he ever indicated to you that at any time since 62 he's been in government service? How did he indicate that? How well would you say that Chrisman and Shaw knew each other? When and where did you ever see them together? Under what total circumstances? Has either one ever mentioned the other to you? And the same questions for Bannister Ferry, Sergio Arcacha, and Carrie Thornley. In the following question, the first and fourth names are fictional to avoid Beckham memorizing the two interior names. Have you ever heard Chrisman mention any of the following names? William Walter Jordan, Charles B. Cabell, George Lyman Payne, Harold M. Jackson. Have you ever seen any of these men? Have you ever heard anyone else mention them? Regardless of Beckham's early answer regarding whether he had known Carrie Thornley, show him a variety of Thornley photographs and ask him whether he has ever seen him, recall when and where, and press for details. Repeat this photograph exhibition in regards to Fred Chrisman, David Ferry, and Clay Shaw. And that's the end of the questionnaire for Beckham. All right, and next we have what appears to be City of New Orleans Office Internal Relations, International Trade Mart. Mr. J.M. Sullivan, Executive Director, World Trade Center. Ferry Building, that's kind of ironic. Ferry. Ferry Building, San Francisco, California. Dear Mr. Sullivan, I tried to get in touch with you by telephone today, but pending completion of the call, I am writing you on the same subject I would like to discuss with you by telephone. Mr. Clay Shaw, Managing Director of the International Trade Mart here in New Orleans, is going to be in San Francisco from November 21st to 23rd. And if you consider some local business groups there would be interested, he would be willing to address them on the subject of our International Trade Mart and his experience in founding the present one and promoting the new building, which has just started construction, and the effect of the mart on international trade through the Port of New Orleans. I look forward to hearing from you in this regard, or if you wish, you can contact Mr. Shaw directly, International Trade Mart, New Orleans, blah, blah, blah. And that's from... is that from... No, it's not from Shaw directly. I can't read this goddamn scribble. Mario Bermudez, director. Okay, that's who it's from. So, this is funny because, as I know it, Clay Shaw, he certainly was in Dallas. Everyone was in Dallas. But Clay Shaw had an alibi where he was supposed to be somewhere very public. His alibi here was he was going to be in San Francisco from November 21st to the 23rd. And he was reaching out to offer his services as to meet with local business groups, right? So What is he doing here? He's foreshadowing an alibi. November 11th, 1963 is the date of this. So despite the fact that it says he's going to be there November 21st, 23rd, nobody can confirm that. There's no information that I've found yet in regards to his activities in San Francisco. And I guess he apparently shows up on the 25th in Portland. And he's like, hey, I'm here. And they're like, oh, the shit was canceled. So I haven't really dug too much into Clay Shaw yet. He's still on my big to-do list. I mean, I know the basics. I know probably a lot more than the basics. But as far as the deep dive to which I'd be satisfied that I got through it and understood what was going on with Clay Shaw and his activities, alleged activities that weekend, yeah, I haven't got there yet, and I will. Promise. What is next? All right, so now we have International Trademark letterhead, November 13th, 63, 2 days later. A letter from Clay Shaw to Mr. Monroe Sullivan. Dear Mr. Sullivan, this will confirm our telephone conversation that I will speak before a luncheon meeting on Friday, November 22nd at the World Trade Center. My topic will be New Orleans, a case history in international relations. I am enclosing herewith photograph and biological sketch for your use if needed. I'm also enclosing fact sheet and photographs of the new international trademark project for which we have broken ground. This may be useful for your bulletin. I appreciate your offer to arrange a room for me for arrival on Thursday, November 21st. I will call you early Thursday morning. All right. There's a lot of information here, right? This is all his alibi stuff for Clay Shaw, which I now am compelled to have to debunk. So we have a lot of information to go on. He allegedly got into a hotel to stay there November 21st, or that's what was supposed to be set up in advance as of November 14th. That was what was going to happen, but we don't know that actually happened. He's doing an excellent job of laying down the seeds of an alibi. All right. So next we have, let me see, holiday season schedule. This is from World Trade Club Report, reference Shaw, page 3. And this we are going to pick up tomorrow. 76 of 90. We should be able to get through the rest of this tomorrow, and then we'll move on to more Sergio Arcacha stuff. I have a bunch of Sergio Arcacha supplemental files from the Garrison papers that we'll go through. I think some of that stuff talks about the Winterland, but we've got a couple more days of Sergio Arcacha stuff, and then I promise we're going to get back to Lauren Hall, unless somebody can convince me why I should continue to put off the Lauren Hall stuff again. I'm telling you, it's not going to be anything new and exciting, I don't think. It'll be new and exciting in reference to the interviews and us documenting them for future preservation. Other than that, I'm really not overly excited by another week of Lauren Hall stuff. So shoot me an email if there's something you want me to talk about. Shoot me an email, and I will do my best to talk about it. And that's going to do it for me today, guys. I'm tired. It's been a long couple days. And I'll be back bright and early tomorrow. See you guys then.